And welcome to the Goldenrod Podcast, bringing you some of the latest and greatest Pokemon news and a few laughs along the way. I'm Ben. As always, I'm joined by fellow Pokemon enthusiast Conor. Before we begin, you can jump around the podcast by using the timestamps in the description below. Conor, how are we doing this week?
I'm feeling very positive, mate. It's been a pretty good week for me, all in all. Especially today. I finally got out in the garden.
Oh, what were you doing in the garden?
So I'm planting all my vegetables for this year. Started sowing all the seeds today. It was something I started doing last year around this time. Beating up my mic. Something I started doing last year, growing vegetables in the garden. And with the price of everything going up, it just makes more sense now more than ever.
Makes sense. What vegetables are you growing then?
So it's tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, spring onions. I'm going to try peppers. I've not done peppers before, and our climate isn't great for it. But I've got a little greenhouse that I can utilize and hopefully get them growing in there. Lots of lettuce. I do a lot of lettuce in the summer because it encourages me to have salads and things when everything is absolutely as fresh as it can possibly be. You're not paying for it. It's not sat in the fridge wilting over a couple of days. You just go out, grab the leaves that you need, and throw them into everything.
I like that. I've always thought about doing it, but honestly, I had 2 houseplants once and I couldn't keep them alive, so I don't think I have the green finger, unfortunately.
That's fair. No, I only really started because my very good friends bought me my very first houseplant a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it has been slowly, as I moved into my own flat, it was a case of, it's a very easy way to add some decoration, add some life, add some good vibes into a room, add a little bit of color in when the vast majority of my furniture and everything is all monochrome. A nice bit of green goes a long way. So I've been adding slowly little houseplants over the years. Last year was the first time I did vegetables. Before that, I just wanted to make sure I could grow a lawn. But it's good for me. It gets me out the house. It makes me wake up in the morning and actually go and enjoy the sunshine, get in and about the dirt, do something physical, and then eat healthier. It's great. Yeah. I recommend it.
I am one of those people that I can stand by. You can have a good salad. You can have a salad that is really nice and enjoyable. It's just that as a kid growing up, I never had nice ones. So as you get older, you're like, oh, no, salad, don't like them. But yeah, like typically me and my wife, after we go to the gym, usually on a Monday, we have a salad after, and it's just hits the spot. It's really nice, always enjoyable. So this week, I'm thinking, well, we've discussed it. We're gonna bring some positive light to the podcast because I don't want people thinking that it's all doom and gloom, because we've been very critical of Pokemon over the last couple of weeks, and I'm not backing down on what I said. Like, I was critical for a reason about Pokemon Go and Scarlet and Violet because it's a series that we love Pokemon, we love what we do, it's a great hobby, and like I was saying before we started recording, like, the reason I'm critical is because I love this series so much and I want it to be like the leader in JRPGs and monster catching games and just leading the way and setting the pace. And it's not. But there's a lot to love about Pokemon, isn't there?
There is. And again, it captured our imaginations 25 plus years ago and we're still talking about it today. So it's clearly done something right.
Yes. And it's funnily enough, you mentioned about 25 years ago. The way we're going to approach this is we're going to do generation by generation, yeah?
I think that's the easiest way, saying what bits were added in that kept us motivated to come back, or even if we didn't stick with it at the time, as we all know as Pokemon fans, we have that drop-off point and something brought us back. Have we gone back to it in the past couple of years and experienced it in a different way to how we would have done as kids and had more of an intense experience with it, as I know I did with like Black and White? Yes, that's what we're going to look at. Why do we love it? Step by step.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start with Generation 1, where for me, and I believe for you, it's where it all started, yeah?
Yeah, Pokemon Red was my first game.
Right, okay. So why did you choose Pokemon Red? Why not Blue?
Because it was given to me. Because it was given to me by one of my cousins. And I think I originally had a copy of Pokemon Red that was given to me. And then I traded that copy with another one of my cousin's copies who had advanced further in the story and had a level 100 Mewtwo that he had traded in, and it didn't obey or anything. And that was my experience of Pokemon Red. Was I was still too young to actually read through any of the dialogue, so
Right.
it was quite a confusing game for me. But I just loved it. I loved the monsters. I loved roaming around the world and running into all these different creatures, being able to catch them, being able to train up the ones I really liked. I didn't do a whole lot of the gyms and stuff until much later. I think Gen 2 was the first game I actually beat. I don't think I beat Red and Blue back in the day.
Right.
Yeah. But
was this go on, was there something that really stood out? Like, what was so obviously you've mentioned that, like, you were given it and, you know, you had probably frustrations of a Pokemon that didn't obey you. You didn't really read the text, but, like, what was it about it that you loved?
So for me, it wasn't even necessarily the games. Like, I'm really into the games now. I'm really into game design and all that kind of stuff. And I could sit here with the later generations and break down, yes, this is the element of the game I really like, and we will get into that. But back then it was more about the community aspect of it. So I wasn't a very popular kid. I didn't socialize very well. So when Pokemania was hitting and everybody liked Pokemon, it was how I interacted with the world. It was my in. It was a case of, you like Pokemon, I like Pokemon too. Let's talk about it. And let's not pretend that that hasn't been the rest of my life and isn't now what I do, is talk to people in this brilliant community who all just happen to like these weird, strange creatures. And that's how we meet. It's how we met.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love it. So for me, funnily enough, I got Pokemon Yellow as my first one. And I remember going to, I think it was Comet, I want to say. And I remember the retail park it was on, and we got there. I had the money for my birthday, and they didn't have Pokemon Yellow. They only had Pokemon Red. But I was like, adamant, no, I'm getting Pokemon Yellow. So at the weekend, managed to pick it up, and by this point, I was aware of Pokemon. I was aware of the anime, and it was one of the reasons why I kind of got Yellow, because I was told that, oh yeah, it's kind of similar to Ash's story, and you start with a Pikachu. So I was like, okay, I'm completely on board with this. And for me, it's just that initial start where, you know, you go into the wild, Professor Oak catches the Pikachu, you go back, Pikachu suddenly springs out of the Pokeball, you talk to him, he's not very happy, and just on that journey of, oh, okay, Team Rocket suddenly ambush you in Mount Moon, oh, you can get a Charmander, a Bulbasaur, and a Squirtle as you progress in the game, and, you know, going against Lieutenant Surge, and, you know, I was one of those kids that was like, okay, right, in the anime, they did it, you know, Pikachu versus Raichu, and that's how I want to do it. And, like, to the point where the first time I played, I didn't even call myself Ben, I called myself Ash.
Yeah.
And I completely butchered that first playthrough because I basically soloed it with Primeape. To the point where Primeape actually got me through Sabrina's gym with no problem whatsoever because it was so over-leveled. And one of the annoying things that happened was that while I was in school one day, because my brother was off ill, he played my save file, and he got from Erica. So he beat Erica. He beat Giovanni in the hideout in
Silphco?
in Cerulean. No, Saladon.
Oh, the underground.
Yeah, in the Team Rocket base under the game corner. He did the tower over on the right hand side. Basically, he did a lot of the game for me, and I was so in love with the game. Even though I was frustrated, I still completed it. And then this is how much I love playing that game. Is that on that file, I completed the Pokedex, like 150 Pokemon. And I restarted it. Like, I deleted my save file and started again. And it was just the magic of... There's something about it. Just the fact that you build up this roster of Pokemon, you go with them on this journey, and as you travel, they change and grow with you, whether or not it's evolution, learning new moves. You like you mentioned, the community aspect of my brother had Pokemon Blue and he had another Game Boy, and the fact that we got the link cables and plugged him in and traded over the Pokemon to complete the Pokedex.
And you always had that one kid in the street who had the Game Shark. So you'd be trading over the Master Balls and whatnot. Or was that just me?
That wasn't me for Generation 1, that was me for Generation 2. So Generation 1 was a pure, pure legitimate run, no cheating. Cheating can add, I'm not saying cheating's bad, like it can add enjoyment to the games. But the first 2 save files were very much, okay, I'm playing this legit. And then I loved it that much, I also bought Pokemon Red. And I haven't got that, unfortunately, anymore. I don't know where it went, but I've still got the yellow. It's, the original Pokemon Yellow that I had. It's worn, it's dirty, it sits in a little protective case, and I love it. Absolutely love it, to the point where when my daughter started to get into Pokemon, I got her to play that one first, and she didn't enjoy it because it is dated. Like, we look at it through the lenses of nostalgia, and, there's a lot of quality of life improvements that they've brought to the Pokemon games since. But going back to that first generation, there's something about it, whether or not it's nostalgic, magic, whatever word you want to use, there's something about it that you just can't help but go, oh, this is just a good place to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's got some of the strongest memories for me. Like, when I look back and I think about early childhood, there's not a lot there, but Pokemon sticks out massively. I remember sitting in my hotel room, playing through the game and trying to get through Viridian Forest and getting lost. So having the walkthrough out next to me and trying to work out this map that I'm looking at and reading all the different things. And it's like, okay, if I go here, and my dad would come in and he'd help me and he'd sit down and be like, okay, you want to go up? You want to go right? No. Right's the other way, buddy. And we'd work our way through Viridian City. And one of the things I always loved about it is it has a feeling of being so open that you have infinite options.
Yeah.
You can have whatever Pokemon you like, however many of them you like, in whatever order you like, at whatever level you like, with whatever moves you like. There just seemed to be so much going on, but it never ever felt overwhelming, because at any point you can just go, no, I like this one, I'm going to train it up, and that's going to win me the game. Or you can have a team of really low Pokemon, but because they've all got the right type advantage, you win anyway.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to approach it that it is that replayable. That, yeah, sure, I only got a third of the way through, but I want to restart and try it a different way. And I've played games before where, especially in RPGs, one of the ones that always sticks out in my head is Mass Effect, because I played Mass Effect up until the point you played it.
Yep.
Okay.
Paragon or Renegade?
I think I played Paragon initially, because I only played through it once. But the big plant monster in the first game?
Yes.
Right. So I got up to there, which, as far as Mass Effect is concerned, isn't that far into the game. But for me, it was a good couple of days worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached it and realized that, I'm under-leveled and my team is spec'd wrong. However, there's an autosave just as you walk into the room. So there's now no way to turn back. So it's either I bash my head against this wall and get nowhere, or I restart the last 30 hours of gameplay because I sat there and read all the dialogue really slowly. And I was just not up for it. Whereas the amount of times I've restarted Red is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I can remember the time when, as I say, I had the Mewtwo, and I restarted that and played through with basically just a Squirtle and got all the way up to our Blastoise until I got to Lieutenant Surge's gym, and then I couldn't get past this Raichu, so I had to go and find a Dug Trio. Not a Diglett, it had to be a Dug Trio, because it was the only thing I could hit without taking it out in one shot. And then the Dug Trio helped me get past Surge, and then I got stuck again, and at some point I restarted the game again, because it feels so alive so early. There's so much going on, and I don't think any other game had offered that to me previously.
I can understand that. I like, when the first generation of Pokemon came out, like, there was, at least for me, I'm sure there were games like it, but there was nothing I was playing that was like it. There was nothing out there that scratched that, that itch. Like, you could have other, exploration games, arcade games, side-scrolling games. There was like so many variations. For every Mario, there was a Sonic, but for Pokemon, there was nothing else like it. At least there wasn't anything else for me.
No, and again, like one of the closest ones is Digimon. And don't get me wrong, the Digimon series I will still stand here and say is better than the Pokemon series, at least the first generation of it. But I didn't like it as much at the time because it wasn't what everybody was involved in. It wasn't, as I say, my entry point to the world and to socialization. So Pokemon became a little bit of an obsession for me. And I had the cards, I had the games, I watched the show, I got all the cereals. Looking back on it, might have been a bit excessive. But weirdly enough, I know kids now, I've got friends who have children who are just getting into Pokemon, and I see the same thing. It's posters slapped all over the wall, all the plushies. They have the games, even if they're not playing them all at the same time. They have to have all the games. They have to have the cards, even if they don't like. Because we didn't used to play the card game. I didn't know how to play the card game. We used to have a stack of 80, 90 cards, and I remember playing in the front of my mate's house and the wind coming along and blowing over my massive stack of cards because I thought these are my Pokemon cards. That's what you do, right? You play with them all, not build specific decks. But I did also have the CD that you got in a cereal packet, I believe. I may be wrong on that, but that would teach you how to play the game, except for it was some really creepy girl who was animated really badly and will always beat me up with her Seeking. It was so good. It was such a wonderful time to be a Pokemon fan was Pokemania because you couldn't escape it and you didn't want to.
Yeah. It was everywhere. It was open. It was, an escape from reality and all the different avenues it just had covered. Whether, like you say, whether or not it was the games trading card, whether or not it was, toys, whether or not they were ones you bought in the shops or ones you got from, I believe, Burger King, although McDonald's probably had toys as well, to be honest with you. It was just absolutely everywhere, but it deserved to be because, there was basically no barrier to entry. It was just so easy to get into and play and experience, and the fact that you could practically just save anywhere and you could load up the game anywhere, and even if you only got to play a couple of minutes, you could then save, put it down and go away. It wasn't like so many other games at the time where looking back at some of the older games where there weren't save features, like you turned off your console and it's like, okay, turn it back on, you've got to start from scratch. Whereas Pokemon, you could like this adventure that you could go on that you could just pick up whenever you want and you couldn't put it down. And there were many times where, I was in the back of the car, it was night, trying to play the Game Boy.
Trying to play by streetlight as they pass by overhead.
Yeah, whenever it passed by.
I had so much car sickness from that.
Did you?
Oh, it was horrendous.
I could imagine. And this was like before, because it wasn't until the Game Boy SP.
Yeah,
that had a backlight. Like everything else before then, there was no backlight. So it was, and the original Game Boy, because I was never lucky enough to get a Game Boy Color, or I think it was the Game Boy Pocket was the one between the two of them. So I had the original Game Boy, which absolutely ate the battery. And I just remember getting this Game Boy, and it was secondhand. And without a shadow of doubt, straight away as soon as I got it, I was like, I know exactly what game I want for this. And yeah, it was Pokemon Yellow. And I dread to think how many batteries I must have gone through playing that game over and over again. And then, the second time I've completed Yellow, and I'm like, okay, right, let's go and buy Red for a game that was, 95% the same. Like it. But at the time, I loved the fact that, okay, I can play this second game, and even though it is so similar, even though the mechanics of it are identical, even though the Pokemon you can get are identical, it was just another way to play this game that I loved. And back then, the fact that you could get multiple versions, like, was really clever. Game Freak isn't the only company to do this. There have been other companies that have tried to do, multiple, different variations on the same game, so you can get, either version A or version B. But nobody's ever done it like Pokemon. And like, for me, it was the fact that the version you got said something about your personality and your friend, and the people in your friendship, or the fact that you could, it brought you together where your friend had blue, you had yellow, and then another friend had red, so you could kind of work together to complete the Pokedex. And just, it's just great.
It is, and it's funny looking back now that because it was the first time that had happened, I rate it so highly. And yet nowadays, the fact that Pokemon still has multiple versions kind of infuriates me. Agreed. But we're being positive. We're showing love. We are being positive, but it's what's the difference there? Why was it so good then and maybe not so much now? Because again, it's a question of, is it purely nostalgic glasses that I enjoyed the experience of it? That's why I rate it so highly. Yeah, there's levels of that. But I think it offered something different. And what we'll notice with the franchise as it goes on is, although they try different things, it never strays too far from itself.
Yeah.
And I think over time that magic has dwindled out, especially as, we've got older. We've kind of seen how the trick is done. If you get my metaphor, like, if you watch a magic trick the first time, wow! You watch the same magic trick again, you're like, yeah, no, that's still really cool. You watch it a third time, you're like, yeah, no, I've seen this one. And then once you start breaking down and you know how it works and what's all going on in the background, and as much as the special table that he's got to make this trick work, it's pretty cool, but it's now just, I know what's going on, so it's okay. It's a magic trick. I've seen this one before.
I get that. And I think that is why, and you touched on it earlier, I think that is why at some point most people take a break from Pokemon.
Yeah.
Because they need that kind of reset of, okay, there's not big enough changes between generations, therefore I need a couple of generations break to then come back around to it. And that's exactly what happened with me. I remember going to university, I took Pokemon, I believe it was Pearl. I got up to the first gym, I had a Chimchar as my starter, and I beat the first gym, and then I put it down, and I didn't come back until, I can never remember if it was Pokemon X or Omega Ruby that got me back into it. I think it might have been Omega Ruby's coming out, so I'm gonna get Pokemon X. I think that's what happened, but I can't remember. And just suddenly going, you know what I've not done since Generation 3? Complete the Pokedex. And then suddenly I was like, I just had this moment where I was like, okay, this is something that I need to do. And I remember plotting it all out and getting, like, researching it and looking it up online and go, okay, right, so what's the minimum number of games I need to buy in order to complete the Pokedex, knowing that I was going to play both of the 3DS games that were out at that time. And just like this trip I went on of, okay, I'm going to complete these stories, and just the mix of new Pokemon and old Pokemon, and completing that Pokedex and being like, oh, I remember that Pokemon, or, okay, this is a great new addition. Like, the first time I came across Skidoo and Go-Goat in Pokemon X, and just being like, wow, like, this just feels like a Gen 1 Pokemon in modern day graphics, and just that spark, that magic coming back, despite me now being in my mid-20s and not having touched Pokemon for a good, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. It's a fascinating experience, is Pokemon, and everybody who's ever played it will have their own stories, why they like it, and things like that. I think if I'm going to talk about why I like Pokemon, I have to talk about the second generation, because Johto is still one of my favorite worlds. Not even just Pokemon regions. It's one of my favorite worlds of any game ever. And that may be strange to say, but it just holds such a wonderful place in my heart. And again, it's more about the experience of the time rather than maybe what the game is. I can look back at it now and go, yeah, maybe the level difference between the gyms and the Elite Four is a little bit wonky. Maybe completing the Johto side of the story at level 40 isn't great, but it meant there was less grinding for me, so I completed the game. Or at least I felt I did. That first time you step into Kanto and it's like, by the way, do you realize what you've just done?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, there is no, as far as I'm aware, there was no game that had done that before.
No, it felt so much like a sequel, and yet offered so much more.
I still maintain, even though, like you say, there are a few issues with it, but I think they are issues of the time that, like, despite that, it is almost the perfect sequel. If you're going to do a sequel, that is how you do it. You take what was there in the original and you build on it and add to it in every single way. The fact that, like, most sequels can in some way be described as lazy, I guess, or they don't push out the boat enough because they worry about what it might do to the hardcore fans. But the fact that Generation 2 came out and they just went, oh yeah, you're in a completely different region. Oh yeah, like, you've got suddenly a load of new Pokemon to go. The fact that your new starters have nothing to do with the original stars outside of the types. The fact that they added days, they added times, they added new ways to get evolution, such as friendship. Held items,
breeding.
Berries, breeding, acorns. Trying to think what else was in there. New HMs, new way to travel. Like
the roaming Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that you had legendaries on the box art as well, so you knew they were powerful when you saw them on there. The fact that, as you are progressing through the game, you come across Bill, you come across Lance, you come across, this cast of characters, and, new and interesting ways, like, your rival isn't just a carbon copy of the previous rival. He has his own agency and his own story and development. And then, you get to the Elite Four and you start to ask questions because you're like, okay, some of the Elite Four members are the same, but the champion is completely different. And then you think, oh, the game's ended. But it's not.
And then it just goes on for another entire region.
Yeah. Like, the fact that they crammed an entire region into it. And the fact that the region has changed as well. Like, the first time you go to Cinnabar Island, and you're like, oh, so the volcano erupted then. Okay. The fact that you can't, you don't end up in, the lazy thing they could have done is, okay, right, you complete the game, you've now ended up back in Kanto, and you're starting in Pallet Town, and it's just a carbon copy. And they didn't do that. Like, you had to progress it in a different way. And that's not even touching on the fact that you get to the top of Mount Silver, and who is waiting for you? Like, that.
What's crazy is I didn't even find that out for about 10 years.
Did you not?
So I had I had Pokemon Gold when it first came out. It was my favorite game. I played it to death. And yet it wasn't until I was in secondary school and started playing the games again on a bit of a nostalgia trip that I went over, I did the Kanto story, and I got the message, by the way, you should probably check out Mount Silver, climbed to the top, and found Red. And I had to sit there and just walk away and be like, I don't know how this game that I have loved and has been towards the top of my list of favorite games ever for so many years still has surprises for me.
Yeah. I can completely understand that. And that is what, like, solidifies Generation 2 as just this game that I can easily go back to. And like you say, when you get to the top of Mount Silver, and I remember this as a kid because I came to Generation 2 a lot later because I couldn't afford it. Well, my parents couldn't afford it at the time. So when all my friends had it, I didn't. So by the time I did get it, they'd started to move on to other things. And I remember getting to the top of Mount Silver and just looking at the sprite of Red. And I'm just looking there going, is that? No. wait, and then you walk up to him and he doesn't talk. And then the team that he brings out, and like for other people, that team might not have, depending on the Pokemon you use, like you could theoretically, the team you have used in Generation 1 could have no correlation with the team that Red uses. But because I played Pokemon Yellow first, and I did have Pikachu, Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur, like, Red had 4 of the 6 Pokemon I used in my second, proper run through. And, like, for me, it was almost like I was battling, like, the player that I played as in Pokemon Yellow.
Mm.
Like, that connectivity and just that, spark of, wow, like, this is... I'm playing against the player I was in a previous game. Just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's funny as well because Pokemon Gold was the first time I sat down and went, I'm gonna play through this a special way. And I remember I was around my cousins in Scotland and I borrowed his Game Boy and I had my copy of Red and I had my copy of Gold and I was like, fine, I'm restarting Red. And I restarted it and got it through until I got my starter and I played through until you could trade. And then I traded from Red over to Gold. And then I restarted Red, and I went through and traded my starter. I restarted again, and went through and traded my starter. And it was the first time, because I didn't have Pokemon Yellow, I only had Pokemon Red. It was the first time I had all 3 starters. And I was sat there like, is there a way I can get all 3 starters of the Gold? Well, my cousin's got Silver, but it would mean restarting his game. And then he said yes, and he said, it's fine, restart it. And I did, and I got through to the trading bit, and then I played that game through with 6 starter Pokemon.
Wow. Oh, that must be a fantastic memory. Just the starters of both games coming together is absolutely fantastic. And speaking of trading, actually, like, so by the time I did get round to, finally getting, I think I had Gold and my brother had Silver, but I'm a little bit blurry on the details. But I remember going on a school trip, and I think this was year 7 or maybe year 8, and No, tell a lie. I'm getting this wrong. No, I went on a school trip. This was before I had Generation 2, and I had Generation 1, and my friends had Generation 2. And when we discovered that you could still trade and battle between the 2 generations, as long as you didn't bring Generation 2 Pokemon or mechanics to the battle or the trade, you could still trade and battle. And the fact that we could do that, despite the fact I didn't have the Generation 2 games, like that is a great mechanic. They didn't have to do that.
No. The cross-platform wasn't required, but it was a damn nice to have.
Oh, yes, agreed. Because they could have just left that out. They could have quite easily have gone, well, no, like, everyone moves on to Generation 2, so the Generation 1 Pokemon. But I think they probably realized from quite early on, like, people love these, these creatures that they've caught and grown with and developed bonds with. Why would they not want to bring them along on a new adventure?
Which, weirdly enough, is kind of why Generation 3 didn't sit so well with me when I first had it. Because it didn't offer that.
Yes. So for those
because
of you
not only could I not bring over my new the Pokemon I had before, I couldn't find them in the wild.
Yes.
I couldn't get new versions of them.
Yes. So for those that might not remember the original Game Boys and the Game Boy Advances, might not have been around or don't know. So the first 2 generations of Pokemon were on the Game Boy, and Generation 3 Ruby and Sapphire were on the Game Boy Advance. There was no system in place to be able to trade Pokemon from the first 2 generations to the 3rd generation, which is one of the reasons why Fire Red and Leaf Green was developed, to enable that, so you could get Pokemon from the earlier generation. So outside of, because funnily enough, I found this article the other day, outside of hacking, so there is a way you can mod your, through some, I don't know, technological magic that I don't know, there is a way to bring Generation 1 and Generation 2 Pokemon into the modern day games from the original Game Boys, but they require so much legwork that nobody's probably going to do it. But Generation 3, yeah, there wasn't the ability to bring forward the Pokemon that you originally had. However, like, for me with Generation 3, that didn't bother me, because for me, Generation 3, like, we spoke about, like, the improvements that Generation 2 brought from Generation 1. Generation 3, for me, blew the changes from the first two out of the water, because we went from, oh, okay, it's onto a new system, it's all in color, you've got abilities. I'm trying to think what are some of the other major double battles. What are some of the other major things that are in there? The quality of the storyline, the fact that you had Pokemon in the overworld at certain points. That first part where you go to rescue Professor Birch and you've got it's the Zigzagoon. No, it's the Poochyena.
Zigzagoon. It's Poochyena normally. It's Zigzagoon in Emerald.
That's
or other way around.
That's right. And you've got the Pokemon just there, and he's chasing the professor around. And you're seeing this movement, and the music matches what's happening on the screen, and you feel the agency, and you're like, oh, okay, right. This, like, the fact that they took, it's one of the great things about Pokemon actually is the fact that they take this, you've got your 3 starters you can choose from, but they're all slight variations on it. Whether or not it is going to the lab, whether or not it's out in the field and you find the backpack and you have to defend yourself, or you find the suitcase, you're defending somebody else. The fact that you're gifted them and things like that. Like, the fact that they constantly... It's one of the things I do really like about Pokemon, is that, like, every generation follows the same formula, but they always tweak it slightly.
Yeah, I think Generation 2 and Generation 3 had some of the biggest overhauls.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Gen 2 we talked about, but Gen 3 introducing abilities was massive, changed the game entirely. And more importantly, it was a graphical overhaul. Gen 3 onwards, I would say Pokemon's actually kind of pretty.
Yeah.
You could go back to it today and be like, yeah, it's a style, but it's not an ugly style. It looks phenomenal. The colors are great. The actual character designs are really quite good. Everything in that game feels more alive. And it's got a fairly lengthy story through it. Funny enough, I look back at Emerald, and I've always said to people, people go, oh, how do you get into Nuzlocke? I'm like, Emerald's a good place to start because it's not too long, but it's not too short. Like, I can beat Pokemon Red in about 4 hours.
Yeah, it's quick.
Whereas Pokemon Emerald, 6, 7, suddenly it's... it's a chunkier game, and I quite like it. I like all the things you do in it. Now, that being said, as much as it is a meme, there is a lot of water in it. And my biggest issue with it is the final town, is Sootopolis. Trying to find that on a tiny little Game Boy Advance screen with no backlight, so you're barely seeing anything properly anyway.
Especially in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or even just telling the difference between what is a diveable tile and what isn't, and just swimming out into the great unknown and hoping to stumble across something. Don't get me wrong, I beat the game. I did it, but I think I beat it because I had it and I wanted to beat a game rather than because I really was involved in it. Now, don't get me wrong, I look back on it and I still love my Linoon, I still love my Swampert, which... aced all of the contests because the contests were added, and I really liked the contests because they were different and it was something else I could do with my Pokemon especially when I was stuck and didn't know how to move forward. It's a fascinating game, and one that I didn't really appreciate as much at the time, but I think I was on my sort of swing out of Pokemon.
Okay, see, Generation 3 was out of the 3 generations was the one that I put the most time into. I get it, the whole too much water, but I was playing this game at a time where I had so much free time that I found every area, every nook, every cranny. Like, I remember the Reggies and figuring that out myself. I didn't look up a guide. I figured it out because I am like 99% sure the manual you got with it had braille in it, so you could
Yes.
work out the clues as to how to access the Reggies. And I remember figuring out and I remember having a piece of paper and a pen and going, okay, so those dots means, whatever letter it was, and figuring out like the one where I think you needed a whale lord and something else in your party.
The relicanth.
Yeah, just these weird ways that you would get them and figuring it out, and just unlocking all this mystery. And it's one of the reasons why I actually dislike playing Generation 3 in since doing YouTube, because it doesn't reward exploration when you're doing like randomized Nuzlocks. Is that you don't get to go off and explore all these different areas. Like in a Nuzlocke, you typically just go, right, there's the end goal, I'm gonna get there as fast as I can and beat the Elite Four. And you don't typically go off and explore all these things. And looking back, it's one of the great things about Generation 3 was, they, unlike the modern Pokemon games, where typically it is, okay, you go from A to B to C to D to E, and there might be little side tangents off to the side to pick up items and stuff. Like, Hoenn was the region where there's no gym down there, but if you want to go and explore, you can, like, the fact that, you've got Sootopolis over on the right, and you can follow it all the way down, and then all the way left, back to one of the earlier towns, and during all that stage you've got you've got an additional town, you've got additional Pokemon, additional battles, you've got the Sky Pillar. The fact that you take the boat between Mr. Pico's boat down to I always forget the name of it,
Dewford,
that's it. And the fact that then you can go right, and you then later on you get surf and you can go back there. You don't need to go back there for the story, but you can go back there, you can explore, you can find the Pokemon, you can find the trainers, you can go to the abandoned ship as well. Like all this exploration in Generation 3 that I think Pokemon is severely lacking at the moment. And, Scarlet and Violet going open world, I think, helped with that a little bit. But the problem was, like,
there wasn't enough to find.
There isn't anything to find. Scarlet and Violet, there is no, mystery ship. There is no Sky Pillar. There is no, go off the beaten path and find something completely unique and different that, the game developers didn't need to put in there, but they did it because, they wanted to reward people who were willing to go off and explore.
See, I think that might be, looking back on it now with a clearer head and more understanding of myself and my interests, why I kind of didn't get along with Generation 3 quite as well is because, sure, there's lots to explore, but I had no one to talk to about any of it.
Yeah.
As I say, most people were moving away. Pokemania had definitely stopped, and I knew less people who had Gen 3. So if I went out and found, the Reggies, there's no one who I could tell about it. There's no one who I could share that information with. So it didn't seem worth doing. Now, obviously, as I've grown up, I realized, like, you can explore and enjoy a thing just for yourself. And that's more how I play Pokemon nowadays. It's more of a personal experience than it is a intrapersonal experience. But back in the day, it was very much a case of, as I say, it was my connection to the world. It's how I socialized. And I realized this didn't offer that to me. So maybe that's why it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I still love the games. Emerald is one of the games I have now played more often than most. But yeah, at the time I was like, it's okay. I don't get to play with a Charmander or an Ampharos. So that's a big sad.
I get that. I really do. I tell you what, should we quickly touch on Fire Red and Leaf Green?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a nostalgia one for me.
No,
I didn't play these
same.
at all. In fact, I don't think I played either of the remakes until much, much later in life.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because they're fantastic games.
They are absolutely brilliant remakes, and like I'm hesitant to play play the original, Red and Blue when Fire Red and Leaf Green exists, because they just take all the additions and improvements that were available in Generation 2 and Generation 3 and apply it to Generation 1 in such a it looks good. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful game to play. It fixes some of the issues with Generation 1 that I didn't know were issues until I was older. And realized that, Generation 1 is held together by blue tack, sticky tape, and chewing gum. But it works. But the remakes just, they made Game Freak did remakes before I think remakes were the dumb thing. Like, they're almost an industry standard now where, 5-10 years later you can get away with making a remake and it's quite probably, not very intensive to do because a lot of the elements are already there. You can make a quick buck, especially if it is just like a HD, remake. I say a remake, it's a HD port, whatever word you want to use. But the fact that Game Freak were able to do it and do it well, I think speaks a lot to the love of the company.
And again, at the time, it was a solution to a problem. It was the fact of, you had people like me who went, yeah, these new Pokemon are great, but they're not the ones I grew up with. They're not the ones I love. It's like, well, okay, here's a way you can actually get those across. We fixed that now. We know it was an issue. We know you couldn't have every Pokemon. We're going to make that a thing now.
Yeah. And tell you what else that we haven't really spoken on so far, but the reason I'm bringing this up now is because of Shedinja and just the quirky evolution methods that Pokemon have always had, whether or not it's link cables, whether or not it's the stones, whether or not it is like Shedinja where you need to evolve a very specific Pokemon and have a spare slot in your party, to the point where, funnily enough, I went out for food last week with some of my friends, and we got talking about Pokemon because one of the lads in the group, he's recently bought, I think, Generation 1 and Generation 2. So I think he got all 6 games for, it was about 120, I think. £120 off the top of my head. So that isn't bad, to be honest with you. Some of the batteries have gone on them, unfortunately. But he was saying how he just started playing Generation 1, and he had Machoke in his party, and he was really excited to get Machamp because he likes Machamp. And I just remember the look on his face when I said, you can't get that. And he's like, what do you mean I can't get that? And I was like, you need to trade. He's like, how do I trade? I'm like, you can't, unless you can track somebody down that also has a Game Boy, the game, which I think a link cable. I think you could quite easily get those two, but a link cable? Good luck trying to find a working link cable. I had about 4 in the attic in my mum's house after I moved out, and we got them out the other month when I was just sorting out the attic. And they were damaged. They had dirt on them. They were old. They were horrible. Good luck finding some of them that work. But yeah, so just the fact that Pokemon kept finding ways to, update the evolution formula, because they could have just been lazy and just gone, yeah, every now and again you need to either trade or thunder or use a stone. But it's the fact that they constantly add new ways. So, for example, the friendship mechanics or the quirky things like, Shedinja, or the fact that, oh yeah, you need to trade them, but this time you need them to hold an item as well. It's really, clever thinking and, a chance to be creative and innovative, which, they need credit for.
Yeah, agreed.
So, Generation 4, this is where I dropped off.
Yeah, I played this once.
Okay.
And then never, didn't touch the next couple of generations.
Once all the way through?
Once all the way through. I did it in a weekend. So at this point, my parents had split up, so I came down to visit my mum, and my sister had the game, because she's a little bit younger than me. And I was like, yeah, okay, can I start again? Can I play through this? She's like, yeah. So to be fair, she also had a Game Shark, so it's the first game I ever fully cheated on. Other games I'd put too many Master Balls in once I'd already completed the league. But no, this one I put on Advanced Experience, so I just didn't have to grind.
Oh, wow.
And just blitz through it in a weekend. It was great. It was good fun.
Yeah. So for me, Generation 4, when I eventually came round to playing this again, I played Platinum. But this was after X and Y. So I did it in a really weird order. I did X, Omega Ruby, I think, or it might have been the other way around. I can't remember. And then worked my way backwards. So did Pokemon. It was either black or white. Can't remember which one. And then did Pokemon Platinum, which I'm pretty sure was a dodgy version because sometimes it didn't work on my my DS. Unfortunately, sometimes it just flat out refused to register. But like, I'm trying to think. Like, I want to give Generation 4 some praise.
Physical special split. Nicely done.
Yes, very much needed. It meant that a lot more Pokemon suddenly became viable. Cynthia is a really strong champion as well. The fact that when I came back to playing this, despite having years of knowledge of Pokemon, despite being, in my mid-20s and still struggling against her, I think says a lot about the challenge there.
It's a distinctly harder game.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely is. I agree with that. And with one thing that I did, because I vaguely remember, like, being confused when I finally got round to playing Pearl again, because by this point so when I came back to Pokemon and I did the order that I did and I ended up playing Platinum, I did eventually go back and try Pearl. I'm being very confused as to, okay, where the heck am I supposed to be going? And, credit to them with Platinum is they streamlined a lot of that to make it a lot simpler.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the thing. As much as I complained about Generation 3 being able to get lost in it, there was so much go this way and then turn around and go back somewhere that you couldn't get to before, but through this other town, go back to the first town and swim across. And sure, you could say the same thing about Cinnabar Island, technically, because you can get there easiest from Pallet Town. But realistically, you should go the other way and you should swim across and go through. Not that you should go through, but you can go through the what are the islands called? Seafoam Islands. Yeah, you can go through there and then get to Cinnabar that way, and then you go up to Pallet Town to head towards Viridian. That makes sense. Whereas Platinum and Diamond and Pearl, you're just all over the place. Yeah. Or at least that's how it feels to me.
It felt like that with me when the amount of times you have to go through Mount Coronet. And the for me, thinking back to when I did it the first time, and Mount Coronet is this big mountain that runs down the center of the game, and just being confused at times as to where you had to go. But Platinum, I think, did a lot. And say what you want about the BDSP remakes, but for me, like, they're the definitive way to play Generation 4. Don't get me wrong, like, they should have been better remakes, but if it was a case of, okay, you can either play Pokemon Pearl or, the remakes, I'd rather play the remakes.
Okay, I will push back slightly that a definitive way of playing Diamond and Pearl, the definitive way of playing Sinnoh is Platinum.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm comparing Pearl and Diamond with the remakes. Don't get me wrong, the remake should have been a variation on Platinum because that is the better game. But if you're comparing the originals, then the new ways are a better way to play it, and there is a charm to them as well. Like, I hated the chibi sprites when they were the chibi models when they were announced. Playing through it, because I've played it I think 3 times now, there is a charm to those chibi sprites.
I still don't mind them. I never minded them. I thought they looked all right for what they were.
Yeah. Go on.
I was going to say, staying positive on Gen 4, because it is the game that made both of us basically drop Pokemon for a while. It did a lot right, though. I complained about Gen 3 not having any old Pokemon. Here they are. We're bringing them back. Here's a bunch of old Pokemon, and here's a bunch of evolutions for them, or pre-evolutions for them. We're just going to shove everything into this game, so everything's accessible for you. Fantastic. Love it. The actual development of the story, Ruby and Sapphire tried to go a little bit further with the Weather Trio, and Emerald, you've got the whole, like, these are ancient people who look after Rayquaza and stuff like that. I think that's in Emerald. I'm not just looking at Omega.
It might be in Emerald. I couldn't tell. It's definitely in the remakes. Whether or not he's in the original Emerald, I don't know.
I think there may just actually be Wallace takes you over there in Emerald. I think that's what it is. Either way, they tried to like build a slightly more, fleshed out. These beasts get really powerful and they have the ability to change the world, not just a little town and burning down a tower. And then we graduate to here's the gods of space and time.
Yes. Yeah. Like, I think it's one of the great things about Generation 3 and 4 that they've never been able to get away from is that, Generation 1 and 2 aren't about saving the world. Generation 1 and 2 are very much about, just, okay, you want to catch the Pokemon and take on the Pokemon League, but Team Rocket just happened to get in your way. Whereas Generation 3 and 4 is very much a case of, yeah, you are involved in saving the world now. You might not have planned that when you started the game, but that's where you're at. But the problem with anything, this isn't just Pokemon. This is books, this is video games, this is movies, is that, once you go to, okay, you save, you save a person. Okay, what's the next step? Stakes. Oh, you save the city. Okay, where from there? Oh, save the world. Okay, where from there? Save the universe. It's like, it's always hard to then scale it back.
Yeah, people can't fathom that much. People can't comprehend what saving the world entails. Oh, 8 billion people plus however many billions and billions and billions of other life forms. Oh, you want to spread that to the universe. I've just got no concept for this. I don't know if it humanizes it enough to make those stories worthwhile. I mean, it has elements of it. Don't get me wrong. Cyrus is fun. Cynthia being there the whole way through, actually interacting with the champion, same as Ruby and Sapphire. When you're interacting with Steven the whole way through, great. Yeah, I'm being positive. It's a cool stretch, and I love the lore that comes out of it.
Agree.
I love the extent of the Pokemon world at this point and how far they've been willing to take it.
Definitely. And like, what? Yeah, let's move on to Generation 5, because I think what I love about this game is what a lot of people don't like about this game, and it's the fact that until the Elite Four, you can only get brand new Pokemon. I can
imagine that had wound me up if I'd played it, way back when. Because
Yeah.
this is a game I've only played in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
I played this for the first time on my channel.
Wow. So I'd imagine, thinking about it, if I'd have played this the first time, if I'd have played this when I was younger, so like when this came out, I would have been 20, 21, maybe 22. And I'd imagine at that time, maybe I might have thought, okay, right, I'm playing this game and I haven't got, the old Pokemon, because I would always go to the same old Pokemon. So the fact that when I did get around to it, and because of the order I played it in, and the fact that when I did Omega Ruby, I could choose a lot of the Pokemon I had when I was younger, and I loved it. So the fact that when I got round to this game, and I got to experience these new Pokemon without any preconceptions, without any understanding of if they were good or if they were bad, I just got to choose a team that I thought, yeah, this is a pretty cool team. Might not be great Pokemon, but they don't need to be amazing because, like, it's not competitive. I'm playing a single player game, and I get the type matchups, and I can just choose 6 Pokemon that I absolutely love, and play through it. And the fact with, like, again, Game Freak doing what they do, where they use the same kind of story beats, but they mix it up. The fact that in Black and White, the Elite Four just take such a front, like, the front and center for a lot of beats in that game, and they aren't just, a couple of lines of dialogue and a battle, and you never see them again. The fact that some of them,
all the gym leaders show up for the final battle. It's something else entirely. The story in that game is phenomenal.
It really is.
I'll come back to storyline. I mean, you're talking about like the Pokemon and that. I remember distinctly my friend having it because I was in 6th form at the time when this came out. So I remember seeing it and just being like, "What is that? That's not a Pokemon, though, is it?" And it's funny because I know I'm not alone in that thought. I know that a lot of people when Gen 5 came out went, it's not really Pokemon though, is it?
So
And yet, so many of them nowadays are some of the best Pokemon I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Braviary, fantastic. Crocodile, amazing.
Yes.
So many more. Escavalier, great Pokemon. Haxorus, brilliant.
So I'm pretty sure, like, this is one of those things where, you know, you get people going, oh, well, it's just an ice cream cone. Yeah, well, Pidgey's literally a bird. Rattata's literally a rat. Like, there has always been, in every generation, there are Pokemon that are based off creatures in real life, and there's Pokemon that are the more, you know...
Objects,
or more mystical, or, you know, things that aren't realistic. Like Magnemite, for example. Like, that's actually, no, that is more objects, like you've just mentioned. I'm trying to think of a Pokemon that, you know, you couldn't have in... Porygon, for example. Like, things like that, where they are just so unique. But I saw a video a long time ago, this was years ago, trying to explain why people looked at the Pokemon from Generation 5 onwards, and there was something off about them. And it's because, at least outside of the games, the art style changed slightly, so they had a lot more curves rather than straight edges on a lot of the designs. And whether or not that played into some people going, oh, like, you notice that there's something different about these Pokemon, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it, and it's because a lot of them became more rounded in the designs. But, like, looking at Generation 5, like, it has some really great Pokemon in it, and areas to explore, and, like, I don't think Game Freak, unfortunately, gets the best out of the 3D games, but pixel games?
Oh, like, they'd worked it out by this point. They'd worked out all the little cheats. They'd worked out exactly how to move, how to get 3 different graphics to look like a fully moving Pokemon.
Exactly.
And show so much personality with it.
And it's like when you, I can't remember the city that you go to a city, and it's one of the main ones. It's based on New York, I think. And the fact that as you walk, it rotates.
Yep.
Or the fact that you go over the bridges, and you know,
and it'll zoom out and show you from overhead, and then it'll come back down. It felt big. It felt expansive.
Like, for you can say there is, you know, cities feeling empty. I completely agree with you. Like, a lot of the initial games and the later games, unfortunately, like, there either isn't enough people or there isn't enough buildings. Sometimes there's not enough of either. But Generation 5 never felt like that. Especially the big cities. They felt big. And they felt really lived in.
It's really funny. We've complained about in Generation 9. That's what we're on now, Scarlet and Violet. You know, you got people who just have one line above their head when you walk past them. A lot of that was in Gen 5, but it was in these big cities where everybody is rushing. Nobody's got a second to say anything else to you because they've got somewhere to be. And it just felt lived in.
Yeah. Well, that's it. There's that one street in the city where there are, 30 sprites moving up and down in this bustling city. And then you look at that and you look at what we've got in Generation 9, where you can't even handle 5 people on the screen without some issues. The pixel side of things absolutely nailed it. And it's one of those issues where, you know, now that they've gone 3D, I don't think they can go back to pixel art, which is a shame, because if we could see, you know, the Pokemon company, well, Game Freak, do something, you know, a modern Pokemon game in, you know, that Octopath Traveler kind of style where it is pixelated, but it feels alive. I would love to see them pull off something like that, because, you know, when they, you know, Black and White just shows that they really, like you said, they knew all the shortcuts. They knew how to make, like, it's a real skill your designers must have to make a game about pixels look alive.
Well, the thing is, as well, they did have 3D elements in there, which they kind of started introducing in Gen 4, where you had some 3D buildings and things like that. But Gen 5 was where they went, no, we've got the 3D bridges, 3D buildings, everything moves, and it flows seamlessly with the pixel art.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the 3D animated. There's the legendaries in all the cutscenes are 3D.
Oh yeah,
Look incredible.
Forgot about
But
the cutscenes.
Yeah. The cutscenes in that game are phenomenal, and it's brings us back to the best story in Pokemon. It is,
and some of the best music.
There is an argument between Black and White or Black and White 2. I personally sway more towards the original. I don't think the second one's. Although I love Neo Team Plasma's music, I don't think they're as strong of villains. I think without N at the helm, it loses a lot for me. But we'll come on to the fact that they're the only games still to date that got sequels, DLC not included. Is stunning. They tried so many different things with these games, and I just completely ignored it. And part of me looks back and goes, that's a shame I don't have such fond, long-lasting memories with them. But being able to experience it as an adult with a more critical eye and more willingness to engage with the story and the Pokemon I'm playing through with, oh, so good. It's so good.
And another thing, actually, that we kind of touched on earlier about the fact that, Game Freak back in the day used to enjoy, like, side quests and going off the beaten path and post-game, is the fact that I remember the first time playing this going, I've got 7 badges, but why can't I get over to that right side, the entire right side of the map?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, getting to the Elite Four and thinking, but I've not even explored the east side of this entire continent. Like, what is going on? And then suddenly finding out, oh yeah, now you can go over there, and suddenly thinking, oh, I've still got a lot to do. Whereas the post game nowadays is, okay, 2 hours later,
do you want to redo that again?
Yeah, exactly. Like the post game back in the day, there used to be so much to do, and it was absolutely amazing, and I love it. Do you want to briefly touch on the sequels? I've only played them once, and I can't remember much about it because I rushed through them.
I've only played them once.
Okay.
For me, it's less so much what the sequels did right, and more the fact that because they were sequels, that was the right thing to do.
Right.
I think the evolution of the characters and being able to traverse this same world in a very different way. As you say, you don't get to go over to the east side of the map really until you beat the game in Black and White, but Black and White 2, you do. You get to venture through there instead. There's different gym leaders that you get to fight. Roxy is fantastic gym leader. Marlin's really fun as well. It's a different experience, more so than we've ever had in any of these sequel games. Sure, Giratina in the Distortion world, amazing. What a twist.
Oh, yes.
What a difference that Platinum made, and makes people really sad that they're not in the remakes.
Agreed.
But Black and White 2 was just a different experience entirely, and was one of the first times where Game Freak went, no, we realize that people think we're stuck in this formula, that they've figured us out and we follow these patterns. No, here's something else.
Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that it didn't sell well enough for them to go, we can do sequels to individual Pokemon games, because outside of, Black and White 2 and Gold and Silver, for me, I count them as sequels. Maybe not as strong as Black and White, but they are, it's the follow-up, it's Team Rocket after several years on and the fallout of what happened. Like, I wish we got more sequels. I would love to see, it's one of the things I would love to see is, we get all these strong cast of characters and we never see them again. Like, and the fact that, we've had a couple of games where, okay, let's follow up on these characters. So, like, props to them for being brave and going, let's do a sequel. I just wish we got more of that.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's move on to X and Y, which were almost the rebirth of Pokemon to me.
I agree. It was around the same time as Pokemon Go, and it was the big jump to 3D that I think, weirdly enough, Pokemon coming to 3D is kind of like Pokemon being open world. It's enough of a selling point where people have been like, oh yeah, no, I like Pokemon, and if it's making that big of a leap, I'll check it out.
Yeah, and I think...
And it was... Sorry.
No, go on.
It was really funny because I was in university at the time when this was coming out, and the year before, me and my best mate had sort of been the Pokemon guys. We talked about Pokemon in secret because we still like Pokemon, even though nobody else really likes Pokemon. I like Pokemon, and I'd started watching playthroughs of Generation 5 and things like that because this was the start of Nuzlocke on YouTube and things, which was great to watch and get into. And then Gen 6 came out, and suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, have you got Pokemon? I've got the new Pokemon game. Do you really like it? I'm like, no, I haven't got it. I can't afford it. How dare you like Pokemon now? Pokemon's my thing, and you all made fun of me 1 year ago for it. Now suddenly everybody's into it again. Not that I'm bitter.
So, for me, like you said, the jump to 3D. Not like 3D on a 3DS, so you could actually use the 3D feature. But it's the fact that, I remember the trailers and seeing the Mega Evolution and thinking, oh, okay, like this is actually a really good innovation. I'm not sure if I was tricked, to be honest with you, and it wasn't more nostalgia of, oh, it's the Kanto starters that I can evolve again.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, for me, this is when, like, the major game gimmicks started to creep in. So, for example, Mega Evolution, Dynamaxing, Z Crystals. This was when it really started. But
yeah, it was specifically how the games were sold.
Yes,
this is the game of Mega Evolution.
Yeah, but because at the time we didn't know it was it was going to be. I mean, it's a little bit different because this was Mega Evolution was around for 3 games. It was around for the Gen 6, the Gen 3 remakes, and Gen 7. Yeah, I've got that right, and Gen 7. So at the time, you didn't realize it was a gimmick, and it felt like, oh, this is the natural progression. Like the Pokemon because we only ever get, a maximum of, in a straight line, you get 3 evolutions. Like you might diverge somewhere, but you can only ever evolve them up to a maximum of 3 times. This was a way to go, oh, we can circumvent that, but it's not permanent. And you get the 4th evolution. And just the fact that, some of these Mega Evolutions, the designs of them are amazing. Like, some of them are absolutely just beautiful. Some, not so much, but some of them, like Blastoise with a massive cannon on its back and 2, wrist-mounted gauntlets. The fact that, Mewtwo, like, how do you make Mewtwo look even cooler? Well, apparently you can. Charizard, yeah, let's give it a dragon typing. Like, there's so many, like Ampharos. Ampharos is an amazing example of a Pokemon where the Mega Evolution, the design is so strong, and it really showed that, okay, they're obviously learning about the new way to build these games for 3DS, but obviously they're doing something right because some of the models translated really well to 3D.
Some of them did. So, but that's part of the problem, I think, with jumping between Pixel and because when they'll have designed some of the Pixel mons, they'd probably never thought, these are going to have to be 3D models one day. The problem is they lost a lot of personality in the jump to 3D because they didn't move as much. They weren't, they had a neutral position, which is not the same as what you'd have in Gen 4 and 5, where their neutral position was still, you could still see personality there. You could still see what the Pokemon's sort of attack stance looked like, and not just Pikachu standing with its hands on its belly, looking all happy like, yep, I could be anywhere right now. I could be in battle, or I could be in line at the bank, and you wouldn't know.
One thing I did like about Generation X and Y, but this isn't something that I enjoyed at the time. This is something I disliked at the time, but you swung me around on. Is the traveling troupe that you go on the adventure with, and I remember playing at the time and thinking these are the worst rivals ever. But like you've said, they're not rivals. You're on an adventure together, exploring, and I think just backs up what I've said earlier about they constantly look at how they can change things up. You might have the same skeleton for all these games, but what's over the skeleton is always different.
See, Gen 6 is such a... Sorry.
Go on.
I'll let you finish.
No, go on. I
was going to say, Gen 6 is such a weird game because I think most long-term fans now will look at it and say, it's not the best. The story is a little bit middling. The villain is honestly not great. Lysander, kind of stupid. The champion's really weak, and overall the game's pretty easy. But in a weird way, that's exactly what it needed to be.
Yeah.
As we say, this relaunched the game, probably more so. I feel people have said before that Gen 5 was supposed to be like a relaunch for Pokemon. You had a lot of similarities between the Pokemon that were in that dex compared to the Pokemon that were in the Kanto dex. You had Sock and Throw, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, that kind of thing. I could go on and on and on. Gen 6 was way more of a, okay, we're not going to completely restart the formula. We're actually going to go the other way about it and nostalgia bait a whole bunch of people. But realizing that a lot of people were bringing back to this game thanks to Pokemon Go and things like that haven't played in 20 years or 15 years. So instead, let's make the games simpler and easier to get through so that people can just get that same taste of Pokemon again. And it's to a point now where that's where I tell people to start. If they've got kids that are like, oh, I want to get into Pokemon, where do I begin? X and Y. It's an easy game. It'll hold your hand through as much as you want. It's not too busy. There's not too much change in there that doesn't follow forward. You get the fairy type. You get all the abilities. You get all the things added in that you would want. Plus there's Mega Evolution, which is your instant win button. Have fun.
Yeah. I agree with you that it makes sense that, if they are going to bring people back into, you don't want to overcomplicate it. You start, not basic, because it's definitely not basic, but you make it in such a way that it's friendly and approachable for anybody. So, people that might be thinking, I remember Pokemon when I was a kid, and my kids are around the same age. Like, let's give them this one, and it's not too complicated, but at the same time, you as a parent might have enough understanding of it. Because, that's one thing we've not touched on, is the fact that, I can't really name another franchise outside of maybe Star Wars that connects generations of people.
Yes.
Star Wars is probably the only one, simply because, we've had 3 trilogies over the space of 4 decades, maybe, off the top of my head, 5 maybe, and it's still going on. And Pokemon is one of those things where, my one of the things I bought my daughter for Christmas was 2 things really. One was just this big book of Pokemon facts that covers Pokemon from Generation 1 to Generation 8 and Ash's story through the anime. But then also bought her a book about the movies as well. And just having her go, did you know? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I remember watching that when I was a kid. And she's like, oh, tell me more. And having these conversations. And yeah, just the fact that it connects generations is something that nothing else does. And it deserves praise simply for that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So let's move on to the because I'm just conscious of time, so let's fly through these. I think the Gen 3 remakes,
amazing. Yeah. Actually, really good for what remakes could be. I still think the Gen 2 remakes are the most solid ones. They gave me enough of a change to the level curve, which is possibly one of the things people complain about the most. It changes up the Pokemon you can encounter because you get the Safari Zone and stuff like that. And it also allows you to, have following Pokemon, which really should be implemented in more games than it is.
Yes.
But the Gen 3 remakes are great. And it's really odd because I've said it a couple of times. I will happily play through Hoenn either through Emerald or Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They're actually different enough experiences that I could pick up either.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's unlike the comparison I made earlier, excuse me, with BDSP and Pearl and Diamond, is that the remakes kind of replace the originals if you're going 1-to-1. There's enough changes in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that it doesn't make the originals worthless, because they are similar experiences, but they are different experiences. And I personally think that's one of the reasons why BDSP was so poorly received, is because the quality of the remakes for Gen 3 was so high that it just didn't live up to what people had built up in their heads for BDSP because, in the past, the remakes have always been, okay, so we're taking the best elements of the current generation and adding almost elements from the story of the third game in the series, in each generation. And then you get almost the definitive way to play. And you didn't get that with BDSP, whereas Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, you definitely get that. It is just like if somebody came to me and said, "Tell me one Pokemon game I should play," and that's the only one I'll ever play, it probably would be those games because they are just the right balance of modern style graphics, the old style like exploration, and the Pokemon, and a good story. It's just a really good package of a game.
I certainly preferred my first playthrough of Omega Ruby more so than I preferred my first playthrough of Ruby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can understand that. I think, yeah. Let's move on to Generation 7, which is Sun and Moon, which
it's possibly a game I have more complaints about than I have positives.
Okay.
I'll be honest. Again, not because it's a bad game. The story is great. The characters are wonderful. The Pokemon designs are fantastic. The world itself, the region, feels vibrant, and traveling across it is great. I think a lot of it you get locked into tunnels, and it's actually some of the issues I had with X and Y, like the caves and stuff, feel a bit gross.
Yeah.
But overall, I really enjoyed my time with it. I just have such an issue going back to it because of how slow it is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really annoying actually because like I remember at this point there was a load of discourse online going, Pokemon's for kiddies. They won't do proper stories, and then we get Sun and Moon that tries to tell a narrative through the game rather than the old ones where you got a little bit of dialogue and a little bit of explanation, then you went off and collected Pokemon. Like the earlier generations, there's not a huge amount of story. Sun and Moon there is, but it's just told in such a convoluted and time-consuming way. Like there's a reason why people, when they nuzlocke this game, they start, and they're doing it for YouTube content, they start at picking the starters, and then unfortunately there's a lot of like dead space between that and then when stuff actually starts to happen. And the fact that the whole process where you save Nebby has something like, I think it's 3 like cutscenes, but those cutscenes are intermingled with you literally just walk up a ramp and then it cuts into the next cutscene, and you're like, so I did a cutscene to walk up a ramp to go into another cutscene. Like, and I think
you walk from the edge of the bridge where the last cutscene was to the edge of the stairs, which is all of about 6 steps, and then another cutscene plays.
Which is infuriating because like Sun and Moon, like you're on an island, you're exploring 4 islands. There is monsters from the far future. You get to travel through wormholes. You have Necrozma, which is absorbing these deities, which I don't know if that's in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon or just the original.
Only in Ultra Sun.
It's only in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. But like you have all these elements to a great story there, and the Sun and Moon.
It is a great story.
It is. And Sun and Moon is one of those games where I want to go back and play it so much, and part of me's not done it yet because I'm just thinking, I don't have enough time to really go back and appreciate it. But chances are one day we'll get remakes of these, and I'm happy enough to hold out until that day because I think I'll enjoy it the second time around. Well, it'll be the third time around. A lot more because there is like some of the characters in this are so bold and so out there and so quirky and different, and like everyone wants to talk about is it Norman in Generation 5? No, not Norman. It's Larry in Generation 9. And, he's one of those people that have, like, what I like to call negative charisma, where, they are so negative that it becomes charismatic.
Yeah.
And we have to talk, if we're talking about him and everyone praises him, we have to talk about, is it Nanu, I think?
Nanu, yeah.
Like,
the dark type.
Yeah. Like, there
leader.
are so many great characters in that, and so many, like, beautiful areas. So one of the areas off the top of my head is the town isn't actually a town. It's just a load of boats that have rocked up, and they're all the different types of boats. And, the totem Pokemon, like, really challenging when you play that game. And the SOS system, love that. Works really well. What else have we got?
Regional variants. Which is
variants.
something that stuck with the franchise, and really, really happy it has, because revamping these older Pokemon is very much needed, I think.
Agreed. And it helps to give love to some of the Pokemon that have been forgotten. What else for this generation?
Now I'm scratching my head. Well, I mean, they changed up. They tried to get rid of gyms. I don't think they switched it up quite enough. I think the trials, as fun as they are, aren't that different to gyms. You just have a totem Pokemon instead of, a puzzle, and then you go and fight a one-on-one anyway with the trial captains. And it's like, okay. I can see why they didn't stray too far from it, but I wish it was a little bit more different, like it was intended to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. Funnily enough, out of all the games that we've ever had, this one feels like it would benefit the most from being open world. And
I can see where you're getting at.
Just, you start up, you're on the island, you get your starter Pokemon, you get the ability to surf between islands. It's like, right, go off and explore. Like, this is the one that felt like, it really would have benefited from that. There was another positive, but I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. So let's move on to Generation 8, Sword and Shield, which I really enjoy these games.
These were the games that actually brought me back to the franchise fully. Like, I started watching stuff on YouTube through Gen 5, 6, and 7. Gen 8 was, no, I'm going to go buy a Switch. I want to play these games.
Yeah. I can understand that, because, like, Generation 8 was when I was now doing YouTube as a hobby. And it coming out and going, okay, I'm going to live stream, I'm going to play this. And I remember being frustrated because at the time, like, connecting my Switch to the computer so I could record the Switch because I've got a graphics capture card or whatever the hell you call it, and not understanding how to get it working and being frustrated that I couldn't stream it on day one because there was, like, background hiss. And being so frustrated because I wanted to share my experience of this game, and because this was the jumping point. This was when it went from handheld, and you could get away with the graphics not being top notch because it was, it was always seen as handheld consoles do not have as good graphics as, the desktop consoles. But the Switch, like, this was the big test for them. And before the game even come out, they had a lot of negative coverage because of Dexit and various other issues. But I still went
damn tree.
The damn tree. There's not enough pixels on the tree. And going into this game, but I must admit, there's something, and maybe it's the fact that I live in Britain and this is the
I was going to
region
say there's an element of that to it.
Yeah, I get why they went with this design of this city. I get why they chose this Pokemon. There is so much in that game where I think this is my game because it's based on the country I live in.
See, people hate Hop, but I can't help but just see him as a little London boy. So he wins some favor in my heart because of that.
Yeah, his voice acting in Pokemon Masters is just something else. But in this game, this game, like, we talk about the rivals and the journey that Hop goes on. If you don't, if you just see it as a game, as a journey of fighting Hop, it's a pretty poor one. But if you look at Hop's journey through this story and the fact that, every time you battle him, he's got different Pokemon, and some people might go, oh, okay, that's a bit strange. But for those that are following along the story and seeing that, he's had, for the longest time, he's wanted to live up to his brother's legacy, and he thought he was going to be the next big thing, and he's going to challenge his brother. And then you're coming along on the ride and you are beating him time after time. And you get to see Hop going, right, I'm going to try these Pokemon. I'm going to try this tactic. And just see him lose to beat him. This journey that goes on, it shows that, Game Freak can do characters. They can do character growth and character development. And we've seen this, back with Bianca and other trainers, Silver. Is it Silver?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Silver. Seeing all these characters grow and over the course of a game, Game Freak can do character growth. And we've seen that a lot in Generation 9, actually, thinking about it. Like, the Arven, for example, still maintain we got a little bit robbed that Arven wasn't the main character because there is such a good story to tell that, and I would love to have a story where you really get into his mindset of being abandoned by his parents. Yeah.
That's actually my argument about Hop as well, that he's the protagonist of that story. You are the antagonist. You're the rival.
I like that. I'm on board with that. You've basically come along and ruined this kid's entire dream. Unfortunately. Zacian and Zamazenta, love their designs. I still maintain that if I had to pick the top...
One Pokedex?
What do you mean? The design?
Oh, for me, I think it's the strongest Pokedex ever.
Yeah.
I think Gen 8, actually swiftly followed by Gen 6.
Yeah.
I think the Gen 6 designs are pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I think Gen 8 wins it out for me.
Yeah, it has some great designs in there. Some really good designs. Like some of the Gigantamax designs as well are absolutely beautifully designed. And
I think Dynamax is a really good gimmick as well. It's not too intrusive to the playthrough. You can only do it in gyms, which means that it's not just all right, we're going to click this button. You've got to actually think about it when you do come around to using it. And then online for battles and things like that, I think it's been the most tactical one. There's an argument to be made for terrestrialization now. Fair enough. But when these games came out, Dynamax was it. Sure, Mega Evolution was more flashy, and a lot of people argue that it's their favorite. I think Dynamax was a lot more balanced and offered a lot more strategically to the game.
Definitely. The point I was going to make before, and I went off on the tangent, was, if I had to pick one moment out of Pokemon that is my favorite, it's always a toss-up between finding Red on Mount Silver or the raid battle against Eternatus. And just Leon loses, the hopelessness of it, you're going to lose, you can't do anything, the sword and shield, the rusty sword and rusty shield start to glow, the music kicks in, Zacian and Zamazenta jump down. Oh, damn, it's a raid. It's a 4v1 raid battle, and I'm fighting against, this character that I've journeyed with, the two legendary box art Pokemon, and just this amazing moment where it all comes together to the point where that music I still listen to every now and again because it's just fantastic. Like, you can hear the howling in the background of the Pokemon. It's absolutely brilliant. Like, they absolutely nailed that. And one thing I did like is the fact that we didn't get an Elite Four in this game. We got a tournament at the end. I don't think they went far enough with the tournament. I think it should have been random as to who you got. But I can appreciate the fact that they went, actually, we got the stadiums. It probably doesn't make sense to have the Elite Four. It does make sense to have a knockout-style competition, like football tournaments, what the stadiums are based on. So, credit where credit's due there.
And then you've got Leon, who is the best champion. Depending on how you want to look at it, the best champion next to Cynthia or the best champion?
It's weird because, Leon is one of them where I wasn't completely sold on him, but the anime has made me love him even more. And I know you can't judge the game version based on the anime because they are different, but in so many ways they're interconnected. So you can look at what is happening in the anime to go, okay, right, they are the kind of how he would be in the game outside of when you see him. Like his design though is fantastic because like with all the badges and the sponsors on it, that's what you do, right? The cape and everything, that's what you do. It just makes sense to me that is how a champion would be, and he does have a strong team as well.
I think one of my issues with the game though is that it does have a weak villain.
Oh yeah,
Rose is. I think everybody knew Rose was the villain from the start, so the twist never came, and he just sucks a wee bit.
The
just
twist
does a lot of nothing.
The twist should have been that Rose was actually just a gullible person that could be led along, and the bad guy was actually
Oleana.
Oleana, like manipulating him because he's so gullible, and like she should have been the one. Maybe she's a scientist and she knows the darkest days. Like they should have played more into that, or and they didn't, unfortunately. And you know the end. I still don't know if that ending was. It was definitely rushed in game, but whether or not it was rushed in development. But like the fact that you got to meet him a few times and have conversations with him helped. But yeah, that twist, maybe not. But
yeah, the fact that there's a whole bit in there that's just like actual pictures rather than anything animated because they ran out of time.
Yeah,
just Rose and Leon talking. They're just like, oh yeah, here's some screenshots.
Yeah, that's disappointing. Should we move on to the positives around Gen 9?
Well, do we want to touch on DLC real quick and how much that added to the game?
Go on.
Because it's just the first time we really had DLC for Pokemon, and they really knocked it out of the park. I know some people don't like the Isle of Armor. I think it's actually okay.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I didn't play it till much later, but to be fair, the Crown Tundra is a much bigger and a much better DLC. I think the addition of the game added raids, which were fine, and then the game added Dynamax Adventures, which was amazing.
It's the best way to play the raid fights, I think.
Agreed.
It's the right level of challenge, but it seems fair. And like you can, if you lose against the last Pokemon, it's typically down to you didn't pick the correct path. And if you'd have picked the correct path, you'd win. So therefore, there's strategy about it and whether or not you want to swap your Pokemon. Do you want to go the path with the items, the berries? Do you want to go the path with the type advantage? Like, I am hoping they bring some form of Dynamax Adventure to Generation 9 because it was such a strong addition.
Agreed. Speaking of Gen 9 then.
Yeah. So.
the first open world Pokemon game.
Yes. Absolutely fantastic.
Possibly some of the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game to date.
During
my first playthrough.
Yep. I think the fact that, the game opens up, you get to Mesagoza, which, I think they made the right choice there. It shouldn't have been open world straight away. They needed to kind of get you to a point where it is, okay, now you know enough. Now it's open world. Like that, absolutely fine with that. The open world element of literally you can go from Mesagoza to the north, south, east, west. Like the fact that you have an open world game where you can go wherever you want straight off the bat. Yeah, absolutely just on board with that. The characters we get, Arvin, Penny, Nimona. Like out of the three, Penny's probably the weakest for me, but I think that's because a lot of her story comes at the end rather than it isn't drip fed like it is for Arvin and Nimona.
She has the weakest story as well. They kind of do but they're not really bad guys, and you're like, I mean, okay, sure. So what? Sure. They showed up to a fight that didn't happen, and then the school got mad at them. What? Why? This kind of makes no sense how we've arrived at this point, and the whole idea of Starfall Street is like, it's a weird plan that you've put in place. These rules that say if they get beaten once, they have to step down, and that's how you want to do it, rather than just talk to them as the big boss who could just be like, "Yeah, we're done now."
Yeah.
However, the actual characters,
yeah,
written fantastically. I think it's one of the best written Pokemon games.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree. I think, yeah, we're being positive. Yes, absolutely agree. The actual story and the characters really strong in this game.
We have said before, I think the ending is a little bit disjointed with the rest of the game.
Yes.
As phenomenal as the ending is.
Oh, yes, absolutely agreed. The fact that, like, again, it's not as good as Generation 8 with the Eternatus Raid fight, but when you get, down to the bottom, the AI's taken over, you're battling against the other legendary, and you sat there going, well, I can't use Pokeballs, can't use items, what am I... Oh. And figuring it out, and, like, I've since done that with my daughter, and the way we're, like, basically kind of, the longer it goes on, the more hints it gives you, to the point where eventually you will go, oh, that's the last option left. Like, but because when I did it, I figured it out almost straight away. Well, I can't attack. Oh, what about me Pokemon? And then just seeing it at the bottom and going, I wonder if, and then scrolling over it, and the reward that you get as it starts to glow, and you can select it, and the battle then kicks in, and you are on the back foot, and like that end sequence. Yes, you're right. The whole time travel thing is very disjointed to what everything else we get, but like that ending is so strong. It's fantastic, and to have a game where the story isn't just about beating the bad guys and doing the Elite Four. There's other things that you can do, like the Tyson fights. Really enjoyed that. Great addition to the series. Really enjoyed the Starmobile fights because they were actually challenging.
That's mostly because they cheat, but we take that.
They do cheat. I must admit they absolutely cheat. But I'm actually okay with having those big spectacle fights where they can play loose with the rules. I really enjoy that. What else did you? Some of the character models. Absolutely beautiful.
The update to the textures is out of this world. And brings a new style to Pokemon that it's desperately needed, I think. It doesn't make them too far away from their cartoony nature, but it makes them more... realistic is the wrong word. More tangible? Does that make sense?
Yes. It does make them... It makes them feel more like real things than digital things. Like Torkoal's one of the ones that stands out for me. It, like, in the past, it hasn't looked like, a tortoise because the shell in the body, it just didn't look right. Whereas now you see it and you think, oh wow, it looks absolutely just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and they've done a really good job there.
One of the ones that always gets me is Fortress, who is, I've always looked at and gone, how is that a steel type?
Yeah.
And then you see it in Gen 9 and you're like, of course that's a steel type.
Yeah.
Look at the sheen on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they've done really, really well with that. What else is Generation 9? The fact that they have taken what was introduced in Legends Arceus in terms of the ride Pokemon and just
implemented that all into one.
Yeah. They've done really well with that, and the fact that it now feels so fluid, just navigating around the map, whereas Legends Arceus, unfortunately, sometimes was a little bit cumbersome because Legends Arceus the ride Pokemon would have worked if you only had 3 ride Pokemon, because then you're always one button away from left or right, whereas because you had more than that, you sometimes had to cycle through. You don't get that in this game. They've really fleshed that out. The fact that, there was something else about the battle, and I can't remember the battle mechanics. I can't remember what it was.
The fact that you can run from trainers?
Yeah, that might. Yeah, that's definitely something. That to me, like, the not battling the trainers and then running away, it depends on what mood I'm in. If I'm in I want a really challenging Nuzlocke, I don't like it. But just playing through the first time, and it wasn't a Nuzlocke, it was just me enjoying it, I'm on board with that. like not having to, not suddenly being spotted by a trainer when I'm making a beeline for a city and being forced into a battle. I can understand why they did it. I can understand why people like it. I can understand why people don't like it. It is a thing of personal preference. But depending on what mood I'm in, I can like it and I can get on board with it. What else? A really challenging end fight, like AI.
Which one?
AI
right, yes.
Toro
Yes.
AI Saga.
Sorry, my immediate mind went to Gita, and I was like,
no.
Come again?
No, Gita is, it's unfortunate.
Staying
really.
positive, staying
positive. The battle against the AIs is absolutely amazing. The fact that they probably, outside of Red, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and because he gets extra additions for his team, such as the abilities, like outside of that, like I can't think of a battle that has pushed me so hard, where I am constantly in the bag going, okay, right, I can throw out this Pokemon because I know it can survive 2 hits, which means I can get 2 revives off on other Pokemon, and just trying to stall out and win that game, and then get back into the fight, and you get a little bit further, and then you have to, okay, right, how can I stall out and heal my team and figure out how to be, like, that final fight.
I think a huge part of it as well is just not knowing the typing of all the Pokemon you're facing changes that matchup so much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, the fact that you look at a Pokemon come out and you go, well, I know it's normal. I know the typing of its normal version, so I can probably guess one of the typings it has, but I don't think I can guess the other one. And just trying to figure that out is, like you say, it is something that, like, it's one of the things that I really enjoyed about Generation 5 and Black and White. And, like, you put against Pokemon that you can kind of guess what typing they are, but you might not guess what it is all the time. You might not guess the second typing because these are new Pokemon that you've never experienced before. And it's the same for this, where, you just look at this Pokemon going, okay, I need to basically figure this out, because I didn't look it up online because I didn't want to, because I was having so much fun in the moment and enjoying it. I tell you one thing that I thought I wouldn't enjoy about this game, but I actually did end up coming around on, were some of the classes that you can take.
Mm-hmm.
And the history. I finally got round to them, like, and doing and the history and the lore that you get from them. I came around on that idea, and I did really enjoy them in the end.
They're good fun. I like them a lot.
They are. Shall we, because of time, more than anything, I did like.
So here's what I'm thinking. I haven't played Let's Go, and we have an entire episode on Legends Arceus.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I don't think we should go through those right now.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to know our thoughts, mainly
go check
positive,
out that episode.
Go and check out the Legends Arceus, because, like, we both have really high praise for that game. We haven't done one on Let's Go, but I maintain it is a fantastic game that didn't go far enough in some regards, but as a 2-player game for a young child, which is how my daughter got into Pokemon and how we played together, absolutely amazing. Like, it is the definitive way to play a 2-player Pokemon game with someone really young, because it's so easy to do, and it's a great way to get people into the series. With the time that we are on, do we want to go into the anime?
Entirely up to you. We can save it for next week. We are 2 hours in.
Yeah, I think we save it for next week, simply because it's the anime, 3 episodes, including a really good one. And then the guessing game, as always. In terms of comments and questions, if you have got a comment or question, you can reach us by leaving a comment on our podcast on YouTube, by emailing goldenrodpod@gmail.com, by leaving it on our Discord channel, or by using the hashtag goldenrodpod on Twitter. Let us know what you think. Like, what are the things that you love about Pokemon? What are the things that, keep bringing you back to this series? What are the things that, captured your love for it and just make you just want to keep playing these games? Let's should we talk about what we've got coming up?
I mean, I'm still on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment. I've stalled out on a video, and part of me is like, I can't finish this one because I don't have enough information yet, but I'm so invested in it that I can't move on to anything else. So I'm a little bit stuck at the moment.
Okay.
However, I am working on a new collab series with Baker Bulbasaur. We're
Nice.
doing a new form of a Nuzlocke versus that's going to be entirely on his channel. But
Okay.
we're playing through that at the moment.
Okay. I've seen more YouTubers doing this where they don't jump between two channels anymore. It's like, okay, we've got two series going on. You get all of one series on a channel. You get all of one series on the other person's channel. And it's supposed to help with the algorithm, because the problem with, excuse me, with the YouTube algorithm, if you jump off of your channel to a video on their channel, even though they're related, it's not seen as a good thing because you're jumping away from your channel. So it makes sense for him to have all them on his channel. In terms of what I've got coming up, the Cyclozar video is nearly done. I'm in the final stages of editing that, so that should be out in the next week or two. And start recording a new series. You've probably heard of it, and it follows a conversation that we had a few weeks ago. Fusions, Pokemon Infinite Fusion. I don't know if you've seen anything about this.
I saw a lot of people playing through it. I haven't sat down and actually looked at it yet, though.
It's so I went into this thinking, okay, right, the gimmick is that you can combine two Pokemon into a new Pokemon. And yes, that is the gimmick of it, but like it's based in Generation 1, but they've completely, like, they haven't just used Fire Red and Leaf Green as the base, they've completely started from scratch, and the battle overlay is fantastic. It's absolutely gorgeous. They've redesigned areas, and the fact that I came into this thinking, okay, combine two Pokemon, you get the best of both worlds, but you don't. You also get the disadvantages as well. So there's a lot of strategy behind choosing the Pokemon that you want to combine, because I'm doing it as a Nuzlocke, which means that, well, I can either have 6 Pokemon or I can combine them to get 3 Pokemon.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily... And the problem is, if a Pokemon dies, like, you've lost
you lose
two
of them.
Yeah. And like some of the sprites that they have created. So my understanding is some of the sprites people have gone away and designed them, and they look gorgeous, like absolutely beautiful. Some of them I think are AI, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, they are generated.
And they are nightmare fuel. To the point where it's quite funny, actually. I combined what was it? It was a Slowbro with what was it? I can't remember. But it is just there's a reason it's going to be going on the thumbnail, because it looks so weird and bizarre. And yeah, some of them are just absolutely hilarious. But really enjoying it, and like, I can understand why it is blowing up on the YouTube space at the moment, because there is a lot of love that has gone into this ROM hack. So that's the show for this week, full of love. If you've gotten this far, you're just a top dollar, aren't you, Connor? Where can we find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel at Captain Fidget, or on Twitter at CapFidget.
I'm Ben. You can find me as Professor Hoenn Gaming on YouTube and Professor Hoenn on Twitter. As for the Goldenrod Podcast, you can find us on the usual platforms. Search for Goldenrod Podcast on YouTube or on your usual podcast app. Leave a like on YouTube or a 5-star review if you're listening as a podcast. We'll be back next Friday for another week of Pokemon podcast content.
See ya!